on the douchebag thing, there's no easy way to say this. I think they park like douchebags, and that's what it looks like in the field when you plug one of those chargers in. Morning, good afternoon, good night, whatever time it happens to be where you're at. Today we're going to do another in-depth video on the Rivian R1T. One comment that a lot of people made on my video, on some other videos where guys used my footage, was they parked like douchebags, the guys from Rivian. I mean, there's no other way to say it. They were kind of over in the other parking spot. Being a guy who uses an electric car and a guy who uses these charging stations a lot, I think there's actually a pretty good reason for this, and I'll get into that in a minute. One quick note, the next video is going to be the charging rate. Today we're going to talk about the charging station, so let's go ahead and get started. First, let's just take a look at the video that I did capture right there. I like how the charging port door kind of opens to the side. And so if we go back, so here is the charging port, and you'll, just for a note, I'll get into this later, you'll see how right through here they have got a nice straight line for, a relatively straight line for how the charger plugs into the charger port. And that has to do with why I think they park like douchebags, and we'll get to that. But in looking at this, one of the concerns that I have driving a Chevy Bolt EV is that when you plug into the charger, this is basically a piece of plastic that's being plugged in here, and you've got all the strength of this cable that goes in there, and it torques a little bit. And in looking at this, my concern and my hope is that everything back behind here mounts really strong, like really strong into that frame. If they're not doing that, then there's some concerns here. And looking at it though, it looks like this is a plastic cover plate, and I'm assuming that everything behind there is mounted solid. I would like to think so, it being a truck and all. On the douchebag thing, there's no easy way to say this. That cable has got a lot of stress it puts on these things, on these charge ports. And I myself, if there's nobody there, and most of the time these days at the charging stations I go to, because where I live, there's not a lot of electric cars, and most of the cars out there are Teslas. Teslas have their own chargers, so they don't have the same problem. I think that Tesla's got a better design for how their cars plug in. Most of us, if there's nobody there, I'll look around, I'll park like a douchebag too, and I'll show you why. So let's cut to the field, and I'll show you that right now. All right, so the issue with these public chargers, the DC fast chargers, is this cable right here. It is very, very, very rigid. If you look inside here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cables going through this. Plus, I think this is a liquid cooled cable. So there's actually some kind of coolant that has to go in here, loop around, go back out to keep everything cool in the heat of summer when it's working. And so when you go to plug it in, I'm just holding it loose here. You got to kind of umph it, plug it in, and then what it's doing is it's putting tension on this entire plug structure and torquing it over that way. Plug it in, I'm going to let go nice and easy. You'll see it actually moves. And back here, I mean, this is kind of where it is neutral. It's moving a good 4 or 5 degrees. I mean, it's definitely torquing that thing. So my concern is, with the Rivian system, it looks to me like it has a big flat surface that's behind there, but that could just be all plastic. So is their system strong enough to keep this thing from torquing? All right, so that leads me to my next question. Did the guys at Rivian actually park like douchebags, or were they doing something that I actually do sometimes? Because there's so much torque on that cable at these public stations, they tend to make it difficult to park in the actual traditional parking spots and not have that torquing issue. So if there's not a lot of people at the charging station, like right now I'm the only guy here, I'll park like a douchebag, and I will do that because it's, in my opinion, better on the car. So I was actually talking recently with one of the contractors who works with ChargePoint, and they're installing new stations, and I was telling him, like, I think that there's the potential for a class action lawsuit coming down the lines, because
especially on the Chevy Bolt, and I don't know who the liability would be. It would be GM or if it would be with the charge point. But the spacing of a traditional parking spot is inadequate with the size of the cables when they plug those into the cars. And because of this torquing issue that I'm talking about, they could potentially be in a situation where their cars are being damaged because of the spacing. And to fix that, they physically need to either change the cable to something that's going to not have that issue, or they're going to have to change the parking spots so that people have adequate space to park their car and plug in without severely torquing the plug on their car. Probably the parking spot would be a better option because different cars are going to have different charging ports at different locations. Those are my thoughts on that. Alright, so now I just parked like a douchebag, and I'm going to show you why I think that's a good idea when you're parking at one of the public charging stations. So let's check that out. Then we got the vehicle parked at an awkward angle, douchebag angle, and there's much less torque on this when it's parked at a funny angle. This is the angle that this naturally wants to be at, which is why I parked the vehicle the way I did. And now the only real torque issue I have is kind of the up and down torque from this thing being plugged in there. That's much, much better when it's like this. Better for your vehicle long term, structurally, if you're plugging it in like this. And that might be why the guys at Rivian parked the way they did, like douchebags. So there you have it. That's why I think they park like douchebags, and that's what it looks like in the field when you plug one of those chargers in. So as you can see, if you looked on my video, you'll see there was a lot of movement in the charger port on the car. And my hope is that the Rivian charger port does not have anywhere near as much movement as the Chevy Bolt does. Anybody who's using these charger ports, they're going to have that same thing. So if we go back and we look at the video, what they were doing is just making it easier on themselves to plug that thing in. I don't think they were necessarily concerned with the torquing that I am, although these guys that are driving this thing, they're driving it all day, every day, and plugging it in. So they may be thinking about that, although if they're thinking about that, they're probably trying to fix it. So I don't think that's the case. I actually think, looking at it, it looks like they got some covers, some plastic decorative covers, and they probably have a really solid mount behind that, in contrast to what I have on the Chevy Bolt EV. But in reality, it's probably just making it easier on themselves. Really quick, I'm going to switch over to talk about the next video. Next video, this is actually from Electrify America's site. I have video of this screen from that, and I'm working on backing up the information on that. Like I said, this information here about where they started their charge is a little bit blurry, but I do pretty clearly see how many kilowatts were incidentally being charged, what time they had, how long they'd been charging at that time, and how many kilowatts had been delivered. From that, I should be able to tell you with a reasonable amount of accuracy how long it's going to take to charge all three of the current batteries that my quick read through says that they have. So stay tuned. Next time we're going to see that video, and in the meantime, work hard, play hard, be a big softie when you get home, and if I don't see you, have a good life.
Be sure to check out my online store where you get cool t-shirts, not just mountain bike shirts.
Jeep and overlanding t-shirts, mountain bike related t-shirts, other loud and obnoxious Jeep shirts, van life t-shirts, cool t-shirts like this one right here that tells everybody you're not a cyclist, you are a mountain biker.
Kids t-shirts!
And other cool shirts like this one right here.
Buy my dad's t-shirts, then we don't have to